Welcome, brethren, to our study today. This is kind of going to be part two of our series about this 144,000 in connection with the Sunday law. Now, we've got to hand it to some of our brethren. They're really sharp. They're asking some good questions. We heard from some of the brethren, and they wanted to know a little more about this situation because apparently, and it's it's logical that there are quite a few brethren out there that believe that the Sunday law will be the cause of Jacob's trouble, and that the 144,000 will be affected by the Sunday law. In other words, the persecution is going to come to them. But as we showed in our last presentation, the deliverance, we showed that, if you're going to believe that, you got to go against quite a lot of references that show otherwise. And so this part here about the 144,000 and how soon they get to the kingdom is an important part of this end time puzzle. You got to be able to know this because this is even a glue that holds together the end time events so that you can see clearly how they unfold. So this is an important part of the study. And as the picture shows, the inspiration likens the leaving towards the kingdom as if fleeing from an earthquake. So we're going to get into this, so we'll make a deep dive here, and it's not going to be a real long study, but we're going to go, like I said, part two here, and then we'll finish up with some other related questions about this topic. Like I said, this topic of 144,000 and the Sunday law and the relations and everything, the timing and end time events is fairly large. It's not something that you can just do in a little while. You've got to take a lot of pieces together and put everything together, including the charts, and all the different things. So, like I said, it's great. It's great. It makes the study, and we have to sort this out. Well, how does this harmonize with this one over here? But again, as we've mentioned many times, brethren, you can't have an idea and then you've got to say to the three or four that you can just push those under the rug. Okay, yeah, they're there, but let's just kind of push them under the rug and let's stick with my idea. No, those have to be harmonized. And so when you harmonize everything, you will know you're on the right path, right? Because the scripture, the message tells us clearly about harmonization. You can watch one of our videos about steady keys, steady keys to the message. And, mark every word, harmonization, weight of evidence, knowing the progression of light. All these different things are keys that will help us to figure out the topic, figure out the subject, and we can get a clearer understanding. Like the Bible says, rightly divide the word of truth. So we ask that our listeners always pause the video, kneel and pray, claim the promise of John 16:13, and he shall be faithful and guide us into all truth. Let's begin. All right, so let's take a quick review of our last study. We quoted track 15, page 88. We're not going to read it all, but, at your leisure, you can pause this video. And, excuse me, brother, the wife is calling me, but I'm going to put it on hold. Now, we're not going to read every one, but you'll notice in each individual reference here, and there's 4 of them, they all back up the same thing, that the saints will not be persecuted by the Sunday law. Each one of these. All right? For instance, in the last one there, against her personally, though, he will not war. In other words, the Sunday law persecution is not going to go against her personally, but the second fruits, right? This whole purpose of the Sunday law persecution is designed from Satan to keep the second fruits out of the kingdom. He can't do anything about the first fruits. They are gone. They have left the building, as they say, and headed towards the kingdom where they stand safe with the Lamb upon Mount Zion. So he can't do anything. He's very frustrated. And yes, his wrath is at them, but he goes to make war with the remnant of her seed, which is the great multitude. And so, again, like I said, you can pause this and review this at your own leisure, but these are powerful. All right, so now we're going to start to look at how soon the saints go to the kingdom. And the first quote is found in 1TG number 19, page 4 and 5. And again, we're going to go ahead and ask that you pause the video and read all the particulars, but we're going to highlight the highlighted area. We're going to talk about that. Having thus opened the way for the reestablishment of the house of Judah, his people, who beforehand had been informed of it through present truth, will flee to the valley, to where the Lord's feet stand, as quickly as if they were fleeing from an earthquake, and all the saints thereafter follow after them. Okay, brethren, so here we see the first of several references we're going to show that is there a delay after the Lord's feet stands on Mount Olives? No, brethren. Flee to the valley where the Lord's feet stand as quickly as is fleeing from an earthquake. All right, so does that indicate a time delay as the Lord's feet stands on Mount Olives? There's going to be several months before the saints decide to pick up and start coming back to the kingdom? No, brethren. We have to read it for as it reads, as it says, that we stand upon the word. So this is the first quote. All right, and now the second one is 1TG 19, and same TG, but page 8. Just before the kingdom of Judah is established in Jerusalem, the city shall be besieged, and the houses shall be rifled and the women ravished. Not all, though, shall go into captivity. The residue are not cut off from the city. They obviously become a part of the house of Judah. At that time, when Jerusalem has fallen, the Lord has removed all obstacles and hindrances for the gathering of his people. Then it is that the house of Judah is reestablished. God's people shall flee to the valley as quickly as though we're fleeing from an earthquake. The Lord smites the armies of the nations, while at the same time he protects and exalts his people. 1TG number 19, page 8. Now, as I'm reading that, let me go back real quick to the last reference, because I know it said fleeing like an earthquake as well. Okay. Oh, all right. So, I didn't know this, but now let's look at this. Twice, brother, twice. I didn't know it, but twice. The prophet says they shall flee as quickly as fleeing an earthquake. So he doubles down on this point. All right? So let's not let this point miss us. All right? Let's not, if the prophet's going to say something twice in the same TG, we know we better pay attention, right? And it's fleeing as if an earthquake once Jerusalem has fallen. Okay? This is all really clear to us. I don't see how anybody can misunderstand how soon the saints head to the kingdom. And that is right after Ezekiel 9. All right, let's look at the next reference. And like I said, at your leisure, pause this. You can read the whole reference. But we're gonna notice something here. In that day, in what day? In the day all nations gather against Jerusalem that now is, and bring its fall from Gentile rule. In that day the Lord's feet shall stand upon Mount Olives. And then he says at the bottom, the servants of God shall then flee. Again, brethren, this word flee is used over and over again. And flee is not delay or take your time. Flee is moving quickly. And then shall then flee to the valley of the mountains, where the Lord's feet shall stand, and all the saints with them. That is, the Lord's feet will open the way for the restoration of the kingdom and for the gathering of the people into it. Okay, amen. 2TG 31, page 6 and 7. So, in that day, Jerusalem falls, brother. So keep that in mind. We're going to look at that point, why that's important. In that day, Jerusalem falls. That's at the end of the war. And that's at the time the Lord's feet stand upon Mount Olives. That's when they go and flee like an earthquake to go to where the Lord is that time. Now here's why we mentioned in that time period, because this reference here is important to realize something, and that is that, we'll read the highlight here, therefore the throne of his glory is his kingdom, where he, invisible to the nations, sits on the throne and gathers all nations before him, as recorded by the prophet Isaiah also, saying, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. Isaiah 2, verse 2. And this quote is found in 4 Symbolic Code, number 1012, page 6. So we see that once the Lord's feet stands on Mount Olives, makes the valley, prepares the people to return, then he moves to sit upon his throne, invisible in the kingdom. So he's not going to stand on Mount Olives for months and months and months, right? So he's going to stand there for a short period just to make sure that the hindrances are cleared out so his people can return. So this is very important to remember this point, that is the period when they flee, right then. All right, this is one more quote that shows this quickness. Again, you can read this at your leisure, but we'll look at the highlight. Then will the Lord's feet stand on Mount Olives, and the mount shall cleave in the midst thereof, and make therein a very great valley. Thus shall the Lord open the way for his people to flee there to the valley where the Lord's feet stand. All the saints with him. Zechariah 14:4 and 4:5. 2TG number 44, page 50 to 51. Again, this is beautiful because this gives a time period. And when is that? The Zechariah 4 war. Right at the end of it, his people flee, brethren. So this is getting so clear that I hope that none of us misunderstand this point. And that key point, let me say again, the time when the Lord's feet stands on Mount Olives is the time the saints flee to the valley, the Holy Land, not later on when he shall sit upon his throne in the premillennial kingdom. So this is important to remember that time schedules here. All right, so let's look at summary of what's going to be part 2 of our series here. The saints, 144,000, shall leave for the Holy Land fairly rapidly after Ezekiel 9. The time when they flee is when Jerusalem falls, end of Zechariah 14 war, and when his feet stands upon Mount Olives. We cannot place the leaving at any other time, as the message weight of evidence leaves it here. The Sunday law, as the harvest chart shows, does not occur quickly after Ezekiel 9, but rather later after the Church Federation period. Let's take a look at that chart once more. All right, and like I said, this many of you brethren probably know by now. This is my favorite chart. I'm always reviewing it in many of my studies. I have to come to it to show you all the different things and how this pathway is so beautiful and yet simple to comprehend, right? So up here is when the Ezekiel 9 church judgment happens. We know that. Now, if we were to mark out the time where they rapidly or flee, like the message likes to say, flee to the kingdom, it's right here. Because remember now, it's right at the end of the war, right after Ezekiel 9, that they get on their travel and start fleeing towards the Holy Land where the Lord's feet stands on Mount Olives, right there. All right. Now, we notice that, okay, they fled here. Now, what happens in the opposite spectrum? In other words, what's Satan and all his armies are doing at that time? Well, they're putting together their church federation. All right. So this is going to be a period of time where the saints going to be in the kingdom, working with the 4 carpenters to build up the kingdom, while the church federation is happening in the opposite spectrum. All right. And this is where they're coming together and deciding what happened with the war and what happened to our beloved Israel and all this stuff. And they're going to come together and decide Sunday law is the way to go. Get the people back to church on Sunday. And so you can see there's quite a lot of time here. We don't know how long it is, but it's not going to be a week or two, right? It's got to be several months at least to take care of this period of time. And then the false prophet comes on in the scene in the United States and starts doing all kinds of miracles and convinces the world that, yes, this church federation idea is beautiful. We must get back to God through Sunday worship. We have to do it. And he pulls down fire from heaven and all this stuff and convinces many in the United States. And so that's why you can't have this idea of the Sunday law appearing right here, where some brethren foolishly put it here, right? They put the Sunday law right here, totally ignoring this timeline and throwing out this church federation period. Oh, it don't really exist. You just kind of have to see it, but don't pay attention to it. Oh, come on, brethren. No. That's not it. All right, and in the next series, we're going to finish off with some questions and additional questions because, like I said, our believers, our present believers that are doing a good study on this have brought some great questions to me. And I want to be fair and kind of take away the haze, make sure that everything's clear so they get a good conception of these end-time events. And so we're going to look at the Sunday law, and if it's not the persecution of the 144,000, then what will be Jacob's time of trouble for them on their way home? So that's a great question. Many have been led to believe that the Sunday law is Jacob's time of trouble, but as we showed it out clearly in part 1 and now here in part 2, that you can't have that. It's not going to work. All right? According to the message, you have to throw out too much to come up with that idea. So it's not going to be that way. It's going to be some other issue, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that, and we'll make a good presentation on that. All right, number 2, what about the issue of finding grace in the wilderness? Now, that's a good question. Doesn't this show the saints will stay in their home country for a while? And some believe that, right after Ezekiel 9, then it is that the believers are in their respective countries, right? And they're going to stay in the wilderness for a while. They're going to find peace in the wilderness, all right? But we already made a presentation on that. You can review that, but we'll go into that a little more just for clarity. And the last one is, how soon does the Sunday law begin after Ezekiel 9? Now, we touched on that a little bit on the last chart, but we'll go into that a little more, give you some references. So that concludes part 2 of our series, brethren. And like I said, this is an important part of end-time events. And we're not going to say, that we're anything special. We're not. But the Lord has given yours truly some light here. All right? And I want to spread it. I want to show you how we can rightly divide the word of truth. And if we put these pieces together, we stand back and say, wow, what a beautiful end-time picture of end-time events, right? And so that's the purpose of our studies and our channel, is to inform you about the thing that's broken in Davidia, and I've told this to several of my brethren, is that since the death of the prophet, our end-time event teachings has been broken. It has been broken. Ben Roden, M.J. Bingham, Don Adair brought into some strange fire into our teachings. And that's why many of the brethren are confused. Many of them have fell for their teachings. Don Adair, Assyrian Confederacy, Jacob's Time of Trouble, M.J. Bingham, those with, the headquarter issue and all these different things. There's so much stuff that has to be unlearned, like the message says. We have many lessons to learn, many to unlearn. And I tell this to the brethren all the time, brethren, that we quote that to Mother, right? All the time. Well, guess what? It applies to us just as much as Mother, right? We've got to unlearn things because of those 3 teachers I just said. Some could even throw in Florence Hodoff. You know, she messed with the symbolic codes, and she's got some of her strange fire teachings in there as well that she claimed was Brother Hodoff. No, no, no. I believe that she wrote those in there. And for some of you that doubt it, just look at our symbolic code report where we went into the new codes, and you can see she wasn't afraid to tamper with the message. She definitely was not afraid. So, well, thank you, brother, for part 2 and listening. And we're going to go ahead and put together the final part and get that out real soon. So, until next time, may the Lord continue to guide you into all truth. Amen.